Jazz guitar technique is a complicated story. You've probably seen incredible players with amazing technique, but if you look a little bit closer, then there isn't just one way to play the instrument. Now, of course, you're already practicing scales and arpeggios, but that's what you play, not how you play it. And in this video, I'm going to show you the exercises that really help me build my technique, which skills actually matter, and how to practice them so that they're useful in real jazz playing. Because if your technique holds you back, it won't just slow you down, it might keep you from playing the music that you really want to play. Alternate picking. So let's start with the standard way to build this skill before I show you two game-changing exercises that almost nobody is talking about. Alternate picking might not be the only technique that you need, but it is the easiest way to gain control over timing and dynamics, which makes it a great place to start. And that said, even though alternate picking is often considered the default technique for jazz, players like Barney Kessel and Herb Ellis rely heavily on down picking, so maybe it's not the historical standard that we often think it is. The basic exercises, scales, diatonic arpeggios, and adding leading notes are essential. They help you develop flexibility for your picking hand, fretboard overview, vocabulary, and a deeper connection between theory and technique. But the two exercises that really help me with alternate picking aren't found in those traditional exercises. Let me show you. The basic movement of alternate picking isn't that difficult. You can probably play a single note on one string very fast. But the real challenge is changing strings smoothly. This is where most players will struggle. The way I improved this was by practicing one note per string patterns, forcing myself to change strings constantly, and in that way strengthening that part of my technique. Now, a great way to do this is by working through arpeggiated drop 2 voicings, like this. Practicing this exercise makes other picking exercises feel a lot easier because you're training precision and string transitions. I also found that the 4-string exercises really are useful because they require you to reposition your picking hand across several strings. Now you can also try this in a 3-string variation, and that would be something like these triads. One of the biggest breakthroughs for me was borrowing from Steve Moore's picking exercises and even some techniques from bluegrass players like Tony Rice and Molly Tuttle. Bluegrass, I really think, is an underrated resource for alternate picking. It's fast, articulate, and incredibly effective for developing control, plus that it's also just great music. Now, one variation of these exercises, which I also saw in a Pat Metheny video, really helped me tackle the other big challenge with alternate picking. Let me tell you how I discovered this exercise, and then I'll show you why it's so useful. Now, I still remember the first time I saw this video where Pat Metheny is warming up, playing some triad exercises and arpeggios, but somehow still making it sound like great music. Now, one part really stood out to me. What he's playing here are spread or open triads. First, A flat major. Then he moves on to D flat major inversions. A spread triad is essentially a drop 2 version of a triad, or you can think of it as a triad where the second note is moved up an octave. So, for example, if you have a C major triad, you would have these inversions. And if you take that first one, so C major in a root position, now the second note is the E, I'm moving that up an octave, and then I'm playing it like this. And of course with the first inversion, we take the second note, that's G, move that up an octave, and then play it like this. And then you have these spread triad inversions for C major. And this is a beautiful open sounding version of a triad that works great in jazz lines and actually is also a beautiful chord voicing. Here's why this is such a great picking exercise: string skipping. Unlike standard arpeggios, spread triads force your picking hand to jump over strings, making it an even better exercise or challenge for your alternate picking. And in jazz, great lines often include wide intervals and string skips, similar to pivot arpeggios, like this example. You can practice these inversions of spread triads individually, but a great way to internalize them is by moving them through the diatonic triads in the scale. And notice that I'm being strict with alternate picking here. This exercise will help you develop the technique to play the best sounding jazz phrases, because they often include string skipping, and you will sound boring without that. One thing that's often overlooked in technique practice is that we actually rarely stick to just one technique when we're playing real music. And a big part of what you need to develop is the ability to combine techniques, not just for efficiency, but also for getting the right phrasing and the right sound. And this is very much the case for legato technique, not just hammer-ons and pull-offs, but also slides. Now, you will often practice legato in a scale exercise like this. But playing like this really limits your ability to shape the accents and dynamics that really give jazz lines their shape, their feel. And a huge part of that feel comes from mixing picked notes with legato technique. Take a look at this phrase, because that's not all just alternate picking. The first leading note, which is the A flat on the one hand, gets an accent, and I'm actually making it louder because I'm picking that A flat and then I'm pulling off to the next note, the G, and that just naturally makes it softer. So a part of the technique is really what's giving it that accent. And later in that bar, I'm using the same concept because I'm sliding from C sharp up to D and giving the C sharp an accent in that way. And as you can see, I'm also sneaking in a few small sweeps and some economy picking, but I'm gonna get back to that a little bit later. A simple way to explore this is by taking a scale and then adding legato in different ways. Now, this is not something that I drilled for weeks and weeks, but it's really more about just exploring how it sounds and how to phrase lines, and also just how legato and picking technique sounds together. Try this. Pick a scale, play through that, and then first pick two notes and hammer on. That will give you this. Or reverse it and start with a hammer on and then pick the next note. And of course, you also want to explore how you can work slides into your playing, like this. Practicing scales this way gives you more flexibility with fingerings and picking hand technique, and in jazz you really need that flexibility. Players mix techniques all the time, not just because it makes the lines easier to play, but also because it really helps shape the phrasing. And in fact, forcing yourself to use only one technique can actually work against you when it comes to making music. And speaking of mixing techniques, let's talk about sweep picking. You probably don't need this kind of sweep picking in jazz. But at the same time, you've already seen that I use economy and sweep picking all the time whenever that makes sense for the line. Now, if we slow down the mixed picking example from earlier, then you'll notice that I actually use two sweeps in this one. On the C major triad, where I play first down and then two upstrokes. And really the same kind of thing on the E minor 7 arpeggio, where I'm then sliding into the first note, so that's a downstroke and then two upstrokes. Triads and one octave arpeggios appear all the time in jazz solos, which makes them a great place to start incorporating sweeping. Now, the best way to start is probably the 3-string sweeps, because they're much easier to learn than sort of the multi-string shred arpeggio patterns that I played one of in the beginning. If you've never played sweeping before, then a good place to start is by taking two major triads. In this case, I'm gonna do D major and C major, and then just slowly play through this. The idea is to play everything in one motion, so not just a series of individual downstrokes or upstrokes like this. And as you can hear, I'm also sustaining the notes. That's also not what you want to do, because it has to sound like a melody. So one motion in the right hand, and also letting go of the notes so that it really sounds like a melody and not like an arpeggiated chord. Now, this took me quite a while to get used to, but it's definitely worth working on if you never have. Once you get comfortable with that motion, try working on 7th chord arpeggios using this up one, down the next exercise. It also makes a lot of sense to practice the bebop style 8th note triplet arpeggios through the scale in this way. Another way I use economy picking and sweeping is in descending triads, like the C major triad from earlier. Now, this is a super practical way to play triads, and you can turn it into an exercise like this. These small, controlled sweeps make a huge difference in jazz phrasing, and they let you play the lines more efficiently while keeping the articulation natural. Technique is a tool, and the real goal is of course to use it to get better phrasing, more emotion, and more interesting solos. But for that to work, you need strong lines, not just random scale runs. And that is exactly what I cover in this lesson on one of the most important things to get right in your solos. And it's surprisingly simple because it's based on triads. This kind of concept is what stops your solos from sounding robotic and helps you play something that actually sounds like jazz. Check it out. Learn jazz, make music.